is the salt and the light, the safest place. She is a frontline soldier, she's a battle cry, your voice of change that rings through the night. She's an unsung hero.
Today, the Women's March, a mother's heart, and a friendship train, all from the mom's view. Coming right up at the top, we have the Women's March. So I got this email from this woman who happens to be the founder, Teresa Shook, is the founder of the Women's March, is calling for the current leadership to step down. And this is what she says in her Facebook post that has gone viral. Bob Bland, Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, and Carmen Perez of Women's March Inc. have steered the movement away from its original true course. I have waited hoping they would right the ship, but they have not. In opposition to our unity principles, they have allowed anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQIA, apparently there's a lot more letters now, sentiment and hateful racist rhetoric to become a part of the platform of their refusal to separate themselves from groups that espouse these racist, hateful beliefs. Now, while we, as conservative moms, may not agree with the views of the LGBTQ movement and that kind of thing, the fact is that these women do. And their whole platform is supposed to be standing up for these women and supporting them.
Now it's fractioning.
And now it's fractioning. And I mean, did any of you guys feel like you were a part of this women's movement at all from the beginning?
No.
No. So now, so we didn't feel like we were a part of it. And now it's fractioning even more. So Beth, you were there at the first one.
I was. But let me clarify. So I was in DC with my
We're not wearing a hat.
Okay, really? I think you know me better than that. I am not wearing a hat. But I was here with my two daughters who are 20 and 23. And my oldest daughter does live in DC. But we were here to attend the inauguration, and then the Women's March was the next day. So we decided, well, we were just going to stay. However, as we were walking the streets of DC that day after the inauguration with our flag beanie hats and our flag
So you do wear a
scarves.
hat.
Identifying
It
yourself.
was a flag, an American flag, okay? It was not a body part. But anyway, as we were walking the streets, I have to say what struck me and what I noticed was the feminism that was going on here in DC from the left, and the identity politics that they want to keep spewing out to all of us is a far cry from what I want to teach my daughters about being a lady. About being a lady. There's a big difference between feminism today and being a lady.
I had similar experience in Chicago. My daughter and I, who was 18, heading downtown for an event, walking, not realizing we're all going kind of in the same way. And girls her age with F Trump or pretty vulgar things on t-shirts or signs. And then we both looked at each other like, really?
There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger here. There was a lot of hatred. And it wasn't even pointed at me. As we were walking the streets, do you know who was getting yelled and screamed at? My 20 and 23-year-old.
Right.
They couldn't believe they were approached by numerous women that were 30, 40, 50, 60, all ages. They're approaching my daughters. You're kidding me.
Yeah.
You're supporting this administration. You're not out marching with us. Well, my daughters were taught conservative values. They were taught integrity. They were taught everything that is completely opposite of what that Women's March stood for.
Well,
but I do think it is, real quick, it is important, though, to listen and understand the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that bothered me was a lot of women, a lot of my friends in my church, they were like sideswiped when they went because it's not what they expected.
They thought it was one
yeah.
thing.
So they went for the purpose of saying, we don't like what the president said. Okay, when he was talking about grabbing, women's parts, they didn't like that. Who does? So my thing was, if you don't like that behavior, why are you behaving worse? That's not how you lift the standard.
But you don't
lift
march.
them up.
You don't march if you don't like what somebody said 14 years ago anyway.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
you
was
march for
crazy.
policy and change.
Right.
But
Women are emotional, and that's how we do react. So I think this started as a statement. It went to a movement, and in this train, I don't even know where this train is going. What is the woman's march.
I'm not sure
movement
they
now.
even know that.
Right.
You know, I knew a lot of people that planned on taking their young daughters because they felt like, well, maybe this is a female empowerment thing.
Right.
You know, I want my daughters to feel
Girl
strong,
power.
you know.
Right.
And, you know, here they come and all these people are not just dressed in the cute little pink kitty hats, but they are wearing full-fledged stuffed vaginas that they have decorated. And
I mean, it's absurd.
yeah, I
It's just absurd.
And can I just point out too, why do we as women, why would anyone want to follow a movement that's based in anger and hatred? Can things not be accomplished anymore in our country by sitting down at a table and talking it
That's
through?
why it's important to
Right.
listen and
Right.
understand where the other side's coming from, and we need to show respect to one another. And you know what? These were women, and they were bringing their daughters, so they were moms. They are moms like you and I, right?
So they're teaching their daughters to hate people who don't agree with them.
Yeah, and
That's why
that's
they're
not-
attacking
I
each
mean,
other.
Aisha gets this all the
To
time.
behave hatefully.
That's
Right.
And I do. I
How
do
does
all
that
the time.
raise America? How does that elevate us as a nation?
well, they were also making themselves a caricature of what some people think
Right.
of women. I mean, to
Right.
me, it really did set us back.
It's demeaning.
I think women were offended by the
I was offended.
I was offended.
You know, even maybe moderate women were
Yeah.
offended by the women.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and they're saying that they want to support the minorities, and they list the minorities. But when you're reading, you know, through the email from the founder, she's listing all the minorities that they're now kicking out.
And how many minorities were there at the Women's March?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm just saying,
I mean,
Aisha, you talked about it. You
Girl.
said you weren't represented.
No, there were no brown vaginas at the.
I don't think that's Aisha.
That's not what
We're
we're
ladies. We are ladies. We're ladies.
All right, keep it in line.
Well, I think that they were decorating them to reflect what they own.
right. That's
So-
right.
Which makes me really concerned for some of these women. I'm just saying.
so we.
Because
I
that
don't think
did not
it's natural.
represent me in any way.
No.
I'm just saying.
No.
No, and I think you're right. I think even the moderate women or even liberal women, I mean, there are women in my church that you would say were all political persuasions, and very few of them said, "Oh yes, that's so identified with me."
Right.
And it's really about an ideology. It wasn't really about women empowerment. That's or lifting society. So
Right.
you know, here's
it was
the
about
thing.
forcing us to conform
Right.
with their
It was
ideology.
about
The
hate. It was
entire
about
feminist
hate.
movement
Yeah.
does not represent our
They
woman.
went there for two reasons, and that was to, I'm sorry, lift the middle finger at the president,
Right.
and then fight for their Roe v. Wade right to.
You don't put baby in the corner.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you disagree with them, it's definitely, you know, your womanhood's revoked.
Right,
If you
yeah, right.
disagree, you're not a real woman.
Right.
And
It's the identity politics and all that's
Right.
matter.
So
you know?
Aisha is she's not a real black woman because she's conservative.
Right.
You're not a real, well, you must be barefoot and pregnant.
Definitely,
I mean,
sure.
they literally, they just constantly throw us in a box because it's ideology. It doesn't matter who we are or what we can't think for ourselves unless we're thinking the way they want us to think.
Can I ask
And
you
that's-
women something? Just a point. Can I ask you, do you mind if a woman doesn't agree with you ideologically? Do you
no.
dislike a
That
woman
is
who
America.
doesn't agree with you politically?
That is friendship.
That is
It's
All
called
of us.
respect. It's
Right,
called giving each
absolutely.
other grace. It's called understanding that we're all very different.
Yeah, so
and
there-
we're allowed to
Yeah,
be.
there's a mom that came out of the doctor's office during the election, the presidential election, and I had posted on our Facebook page about how we literally are shaping the culture and we can promote these principles and values that we care about. And this woman posted and said, "Well, that's just great, but I just came out of the doctor's office and a young mom with 2 kids came in and she had a Bernie Sanders sticker in her car." And I'm like, "But that mother has a right,
Has a right
to
to.
those
Has a right
to
to
teach that.
Yeah.
Just don't shove it on me."
Right.
Right. That's
LGBTQ,
freedom.
whatever,
And don't attack me.
do
That's
what you
right.
want. If you want,
That's
yeah,
right.
You want to
Because
have
I'm
you
free.
want to have a homosexual lifestyle, go have a homosexual lifestyle. But don't come into my school where I am required by law to send my children and then indoctrinate them on your values. They keep saying we're trying to push our values on them, but the exact opposite is happening.
exactly right.
So what's the
Okay,
solution?
Here's one thing I want to mention, and it is the solution, because the Women's March did spark conservative women to
did.
gather,
It did.
get it together, and let our voices be heard, and let us represent ourselves.
It did do that.
It did
because
do
we
that.
felt like we were on the outside of this.
Right. And
Right.
the Moms March
Yep.
came out because of
that's
it.
Well,
exactly-
and that's why we're here.
the women marched to the polls.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, that was beforehand.
They did.
I mean,
They did.
Well, moms
conservative women, evangelical women pushed Trump over to have the win. So we marched to the polls. We did. We did have a voice.
Well, and what made the Moms March different, and I mean, I got to tell you that literally the Women's March did spark this movement.
It did.
And I came home right after I was at my son's wedding, so I didn't even know there was a Women's March. I don't know when you guys found out, but I found out deer in headlights the day that they're reporting on it, and I'm like, what is that?
What is
And
happening?
so I go to my computer and I put tons, like flooded with Facebook posts from all these women across the country saying that what was that? And even women who'd been there, they had no idea. They went for one purpose and were literally shocked when Madonna's calling for the destruction
Burning of the
burning of the White
White
House. And so I'm getting these emails, and the one that really inspired me, it was from the mom, and she started her post and she said, I marched today too. I marched down to the kitchen to make my kids breakfast. I marched to the car to take them to school. And she goes through her whole entire day. And at the end of her day, she says, there's no fanfare, no media, no banners, just me and my children in our silent march, changing the world.
Right.
And that's the march that we needed. So that's the whole reason we started the Moms March movement. MomsMarchUSA.com if anybody wants more information. And
Let's talk about
to
the day
counter
service.
this, yeah. So they're going to have the Women's March again this year. It'll be in DC and across the country. And I mean, I kind of see that there's kind of an implosion going on, but at the same time, because of that, there are women of all different backgrounds who are hungering for a place to come.
They are.
And something to do that's really going to make
Something
a difference.
that resonates with them.
That's right.
Women that they can relate to.
Yeah.
So
Or
we
that
were
don't judge them when they see something
Right.
differently.
And something we can include our daughters in that show them the women we want them to be.
Right. So we are launching.
Let's talk about the day.
January 19th, Moms March for America, Moms for America. We are launching a national day of service. 100 women in 100 cities performing 10,000 acts of service. I mean, talk about goodness, truth, light, beauty.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we want to interject in society? So, you guys will be thinking about,
Right.
what are you going to do in your city? And we get pictures, and we want everybody to be a part of this. And
Positive
then
impact
That's right.
in our communities by moms, and that is how we change.
That is how we change the world.
how we change.
And then you can go to MomsMarchUSA.com and find out more about the day of service and do service in your community. Let's lift the culture, be the light where you are.
And don't forget about the Moms March.
That's right.
coming
Moms March,
San Antonio,
March 8th and 9th.
March 8th and 9th in Texas. So we would love to have you.
That's easy. The Moms March is in March.
Yes.
Moms March in March. All right, ladies, see you there.
Thank you.
So we all know that it doesn't require a march, a formal organized march somewhere to do nice things for other people, right? And Aisha and Beth, you just recently had an experience in New York where you just stepped up. Nobody was watching, nobody was taking pictures. You just stepped up and did the right thing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
The crazy thing about it is, so we're in New York and it's late, 11:30 at night.
It was late.
And we're on our way back to our hotel, and there's this older man, and he just removes his shoes in the middle of the street. He just took his shoes off and he walked away from his shoes. And I'm like, Beth, he just left his shoes. It's freezing. It was what, 30?
Probably about 35. It was freezing. It was
was
last Monday.
freezing.
Yeah, it was
So-
very cold in New York.
I'm like, okay, we have to give him his shoes. And I don't know what was going through your head, but the thing about Beth that I love is that I'm like, we got to give him his shoes. And she
And I'm
picks
like,
up the
okay.
shoes. She's like, we're going to give him his shoes.
I ran to the street. I grabbed the
Moms are
shoes.
doers.
That's right.
And Aisha chased him down. So
I chased him down. He got belligerent. He threatened to shoot us. I'm like, you don't have a gun, but you really need your shoes. You know, and talking to him, what I saw in him, he had kind of like a dazed look that my mother gets. My mom has dementia. And that's when I realized, I said, he must be going through a spell. So he absolutely is not leaving our presence without something on his feet.
And it took about 10-15 minutes to convince them.
To convince him to
Right,
allow
to come
us to
with
help
us.
him. And what ended up happening, he was convinced that those shoes hurt his feet. And we ended up taking him and saying, look, can I buy you some more shoes? Can I buy you some shoes that don't hurt your feet? And he was like, fine, I'll let you help me. You know, it was so funny. But we ended up taking him into H&M. And we were able to find him some slippers. He didn't want the sneakers. He wanted something soft. So he found him some slippers. And then I didn't even notice this, but then Beth noticed that he didn't have a belt.
Right. Well, he didn't. We were concerned because it was so cold, so we were able to get the slippers. But then we went further, right? We
Right.
said, okay, you need a hat, you need gloves, because we asked him, do you sleep outside? Where do you
So wait a
sleep? Do
minute.
you have a
You
home?
didn't call the government? You didn't make a phone call to a government agency to take care of this
No,
man?
we did not.
You didn't
And And do you want to know why? Because as moms, right, we are the nurturers, right? We have a nurturing spirit about us that is inherent in the way that we were made and created, and we just saw the need.
You saw the need.
Saw the
And
need
we
and you
said
did
we are
something.
going to take care of this.
You don't have to live in DC to make a difference. And you don't have to do something on a grand scale to make a difference. We all have an opportunity every day of our life. Each one can make a difference in one. Every single day. It's just a matter of taking advantage and actually acting when you see that opportunity.
So what happened at the
Well,
end?
right. So if I could just add, so his pants were falling down because this poor guy. When I say this big. So we did ask him, where does he sleep? Does he get meals? Does he eat? And he is legitimately on the streets.
Yeah.
And so we did get a belt, and honestly, he couldn't even have like a 25-inch waist. I mean, I'm literally telling you, we felt so bad.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing about it is he was so belligerent at first and angry. He didn't want us to help him, and by the end, he was crying.
He was crying.
In the
And he
middle
was
of
so
the store,
thankful.
he was so thankful. And then the cashiers, everybody said, we filled the need, and you know what? And we only did a small part. This happens every day.
It does. And not only was he crying, but I bet you.
Oh, we were all
You were a
crying.
mess.
And then when I hugged him goodbye, it was the best hug ever. I didn't care how he smelled. I didn't care about anything. It was the best hug ever.
And generosity is
Yeah.
completely contagious.
It is.
I'm sure that everybody who watched you do that
Was
and who
inspired.
participated in it, and then they were inspired to do something on their own.
And they did. They
Don't-
came around.
Right.
Initially, they were looking at us like
we're
you were crazy.
we all crazy and why
Well,
do
he
you have
started
this
screaming
man?
in the
And
store.
he-
I was
right,
like,
he
"Wait a minute."
Yes, yes.
He screamed bloody murder, so everybody was looking at what was going on. But hopefully they could pay it forward.
Yeah. And to the point that Karen was mentioning earlier, joking, did we call the government? This is what we've lost in our society.
Right.
I mean, it used to be people, helping neighbors, making a difference. And then the government came and said, oh no, I can do that better with stipulations, and now I own everyone.
And homelessness keeps increasing
Right.
in all the major cities in this country, where
We've
the
gotta take
tax
this back.
dollars are going to those programs, and it's only getting worse. So government is not
Well,
doing
it's
it.
going to the government agencies first. That's the thing. It goes to the government agencies. They make sure they're feeding their kids, they're getting their money, and then what trickles down is what actually.
Yeah, the bureaucracy
you're-
gets most of it.
When you're funding a nonprofit organization, what are you looking for? You're looking for how much money is going actually to the services.
Right.
So the nonprofit organizations that we can focus on the churches and the communities. When you're the closest you are to where the need is, that's where the need is going to be met in the most real, sincere way. So I think the government just gets in the way more than it helps.
And
We have to do it.
like we just talked about, day of serving,
Right?
moms all around, we're always making a difference. So we just need to do that more, and we need to make that our gift.
Right.
to
And you didn't just magically put shoes and clothes on this man. It cost you something. Americans are incredibly generous. Just in Haiti alone, in the 2010 earthquake, we gave $13 billion.
Wow.
But again, it went to governments. And the money didn't trickle down to the people. That's why it's so critical that we get out and we act as individuals, helping other individuals.
This is
More-
why
it
I'm so
starts with us.
excited
It starts
about the
with
next segment, because this is really kindness in action.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in the kitchen doing the dishes one day, and I had American Movie Classics on, which I often do. And there was this story that came on that blew my mind. I've never heard it. The Friendship Train. You guys ever even heard of that before? Friendship Train. Okay. So Drew Pearson was a very popular radio host. It was back during World War II. It was right after the war. And the people in Europe were devastated. I mean, they were starving. They couldn't plant their fields. Everything was, blown up. And the communist Russia was coming in, and they were giving them, token food and that kind of thing. And they were doing it for loyalty. And Drew Pearson went over there and he saw this and he said, whoever feeds Europe, that's what those people are going to become. Mm-hmm. And he said, we can do better than this. Mm-hmm. And so he came back to America, and on October 11th, 1947, he opened his very popular radio show, and with a dream. And he said, I envision people across America giving food to take over there. 80, he kept saying 80 cars. I envisioned 80 cars, a dream of 80 train cars being filled all along, going through America. So all the people started to come together. They got excited about this. And he said, let's give to our brothers and sisters across the sea. And so all these people got together. It started in Hollywood, believe it or not. And John Wayne was there and several of the other actors. They took a bottle of wine and they christened the train and they started it. They filled up a couple of trains there and then they started it on the path. And it basically went along the I-80 line across the country. And everywhere it stopped, people were pulling in canned goods and bags of flour and whatever they had that they could give.
And this is at a difficult time in America.
It was a very difficult time in America. And remember that we were all living, ration cards at that time. And they're taking what they have and putting it in there and sacrificing themselves. And people who weren't on the train route, because it was just going straight east to west, straight from west to east, they had trucks and from the south and the north that were loading up the trucks and they were coming down and filling up this train. The 80 cars that he dreamed of turned into 700.
Oh, wow.
700 train cars filled with food, clothing, and fuel that was valued at over $40 million. And here's the beauty of this. This wasn't a government program. Right. This was one man who saw a need. He came to America, he called the American people together, and they all jumped on board, and they did this. So we have a clip of the newsreel. That's what I saw on AMC was the newsreel, and we have a clip we can show you right now.
A goodwill project gets a flying start as school children in Hollywood load packages aboard trucks bound for the Friendship Train. The train, carrying gifts of food for starving Europeans, gets a send-off with a typical Hollywood premiere on the first leg of its trip across the continent. The motion picture industry is giving generously, as are thousands young and old who wish to aid our friends abroad who face either untold suffering or communist control. The project is an addition to the governmental grain program headed by Charles Luckman and is an outright offering by Americans. At Fresno, California, crowds greet the Friendship Train as it arrives to hook on additional cars of food donated by the city and surrounding countryside. In addition to milk, canned goods, and other food products, gifts of money have been collected. New carloads of vital supplies are coupled on at each stop, and the train is expected to arrive in New York in 2 sections, hauling 200 cars. Stockton, California is another stop on the Friendship route, over which the railroads are carrying the train at no cost as they're part of the gift program.
Okay, so...
Yeah, that was awesome.
I mean, totally. How inspiring.
It is inspiring.
How inspiring is that? Okay, so after that happened, then France was so grateful and thankful for what happened because all that food came. And here's the other thing. It came from the American people and it went to the people of Europe. It didn't go from a government to a government. Right. So the people got it.
Right.
And they worked through
No
churches.
Yeah,
churches, community organizations. And the people were so grateful that they said, we want to do something. Now remember, they didn't really have anything, okay? We just gave them all the food. That's right. And so they had a dream of sending a train car, a Merci train. That's what it's called, the Merci train. And they sent 49 cars full of things over to the American people. 48 for the 48 states, and then Alaska was not a state at the time, neither was Hawaii. And one was shared between Washington, D.C. and Hawaii. But what did they have in the train? I mean, they didn't...
Yeah, that was my question. What was in the train?
Pieces of their lives. I want to tell you some of the stuff that was in this train. It's unbelievable. So they had children's drawings, handcrafted doilies, 50 rare paintings, a jeweled Legionnaire that was presented to Napoleon, a Louis XIV carriage, a bugle that signed the armistice signing, and just a plethora of their lives, pieces of who they were. That's what they put in those trains. And then when they came, I was so excited about this. When they got to America, they had all these parades, and they went from all these different city to city to city. But when they got here, the train cars, the French train cars, they're wider, and so they had to build platforms to put the trains on so they would ride on our rails. So it took a little while, but then they went all across the country. And several of the states, they still have their train cars on display.
New York.
And some of the, You looked that up,
I
didn't you?
did. It's at the Railroad Museum. So guess where I'm going to go
Oh
visit?
my goodness. And I'm an ugly crier. See?
It's
worse.
I think we need a road trip.
You know what's fascinating about that though? That the people did it,
Right.
and then
Right.
France was so thankful that they were so thankful that they didn't expect it. See, right now in our
Right.
world today,
Oh.
isn't everything just expected? Like everything's expected of America.
Right.
So that's so beautiful that it wasn't expected. They genuinely loved the gesture.
So
Yeah,
I
that's such an amazing story.
And I got so excited about this story. I started looking up, where can I go see a train? And they there's a website, mercytrain.org, and you can find the story. And they have a friendship train one too. And so I'm looking it up, and I'm like, okay, where can I see this? And they showed the North Dakota car. So I'm looking at it, and they've got this great display, and they have all these artifacts that are in their museum. I'm like, I want to go see that. And I'm like, wait a second. They have a train in every state. Nebraska has a train. And so I'm like, okay. So I start looking up what happened to the Nebraska train. Okay, so this is what I found. So the State Historical Society took it, and they had it at first, and then they sent it over to the Nebraska 40 and 8 Society, and then eventually it went to a playground in Lincoln where it stayed until 1951, and it was falling apart and kind of turning into ruin. And so in 1951 they tried to return it back to the Historical Society, and they didn't want it. The 40 and 8 didn't want it. Nobody wanted it, and so they sold it to an Omaha junkyard for $45.
How ungrateful.
The
That
wheels,
makes me so mad.
yeah, it gets worse. The wheels and the metal parts were pounded into scrap, and its body converted into a storage shed. And then on the Merci train site, it says its humiliation finally ended in 1961 when the junkyard was relocated and the boxcar was demolished.
That's
Just like
government
our
for you.
history.
That
This
just
is
shows you
history.
what government does. Government doesn't have a heart. The moms, we have the heart. The people
We're the
have the
heartbeat
heart.
of America.
Right.
We are. Not the Chevy commercial. We are the heartbeat of America.
I think we don't learn from history either. It's just become old and not relevant. And we need
have to
more
tell
of
the
this.
stories.
I keep
How
telling
can
my kids.
something that beautiful just be discarded?
I know.
Is it like
This-
freedom?
it's what we
There's no value.
exactly what I was getting
Yes.
at.
Yeah.
We
Right.
take so much for granted, and we just discard it like it had no value or like it cost somebody nothing.
Right.
These things we enjoy, they cost people something.
They fought in World War II.
That's
Yeah.
right.
They lost everything they had in World War II.
Before we throw away what we have, we should consider what it is that we have.
You
Yeah.
better
Yes.
believe it.
And we're not going to know that unless we teach our kids exactly what you said. We're the heartbeat of America. If we want this to continue on, what America will look like in 20, 30 years, we're deciding that right now
Exactly,
in
as
our
moms.
homes today.
Right,
What we do.
I teach my kids that this is what I tell them, and they're older, but I say you need to be a world changer, and a world changer starts with one. It starts with one.
That's right.
Well, it
Starts
starts
with
with
them.
moms because
right.
moms are raising the next generation.
Moms are the
You're right.
original
And
world
you're right.
changers.
And because we're raising the next generation, we influence our culture. We get to drive our culture.
Right.
And politics is downstream from culture. And so if you don't like what's happening in politics, we need to start at home.
Well, you know what I
Change
always
it.
say as mothers, we literally are mothering the nation.
Yes.
We have mothered the entire nation, and this is our responsibility.
My middle schooler the other day said, I don't like the way this is being handled at school. I don't like what's happening. I said, you change it. Set the standard.
In our household,
Challenge everyone.
in our household, when things monumental happen, we get a rock and put it in a bowl, and we write on the rock what that monumental moment was and how it was significant. How cool would it be to just fill your house with, or having your house a bowl filled with rocks that were monumental moments in America's history? Because my kids come in, my grandkids come in, they pick up this rock. Grandma, what does this mean? And these are ways that we teach what the great things that have happened in our history were, and how we pass that to the next generation. It has enough value to be passed.
Okay,
You
well,
gotta
I
do
get
it.
stolen. I'm taking
You
that
do
one.
it.
Yeah.
I wish
It's-
every household would do
It's
it.
important.
When we talk about the friendship train, we really do have this in our churches,
We
and
do.
in our homes, and our PTOs, because we are pushing the goodness. We're sharing it. We're motivating. We're cultivating it. So we've got to keep it going.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't stop because the friendship train boxcar is gone. It's us.
That's right.
We
are
But the
story
meaning
of life.
behind it
Yeah.
isn't gone.
That's right. And we have the power to literally turn our whole entire culture around in one generation.
Yes.
It begins
Yeah.
with us.
Let's do it.
That's
do it.
world changers.
Well, don't forget that
World
that
change.
here's the thing. We have to be women who say we're no longer willing to accept the things we can't change. We have to change the things we can't accept.
Sure.
That's so true.
All right.
So true. We'll do it.
Got it.
All right.
Yeah.